She only meant to grab his arm in the dark.
I can't be
Now
your
she can't
emergency
forget his
generator.
touch. The lights are steady, the building is safe, but he's the one walking away. What do you do when the man who made you feel safe is the one you pushed out the door? Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe, tap like, and share this video. The more voices we reach, the louder these stories become. And drop your city in the comments. Let's see where love finds us. The first time she saw him, Harper Lane decided she didn't like him. It was easier than admitting the truth, that something low in her stomach tightened at the sight of a stranger's hands. He was crouched beside the front desk, sleeves shoved up over forearms, corded with quiet muscle, fixing a loose outlet that had been sparking for weeks. Everyone else in the office stepped around the hazard and muttered about maintenance never doing their job. He had a toolbox open, wires neatly separated, concentration carved into his face. "Miss Lane?" her assistant whispered. "They're ready for you in the boardroom." Harper dragged her eyes away from him and smoothed her blazer down over her dress, over curves she'd spent years hiding, disciplining, dressing in expensive fabric so people would say elegant rather than too much. She tugged the hem straight over her hips, chin high. "I'm coming," she said. As she walked past, the man glanced up. Pure reflex. Dark eyes flicked from the outlet to her legs, then up, politely, to her face. He didn't double take. He didn't smirk or let his gaze linger on her cleavage. His expression stayed flat, professional, focused. But her body reacted like he'd touched her. Heat surged over her skin, sharp and unwanted. Her breath snagged in her throat. It was ridiculous. Harper Lane, CEO of Lenstra Media, breaker of 3 separate acquisition records before she turned 32, was not undone by men. Men made mistakes. She used those mistakes to buy their companies out from under them. That was the order of things. She slipped into the boardroom, the glass walls reflecting the city below, and buried the odd flutter in contracts and projections. During the presentation, somebody mentioned renovation delays, and an offhand comment drifted over the table. "You mean the new contractor, Malik? Guy's actually good. Fixed that outlet himself. You can tell he's ex-military or something." Malik. The name thudded in her chest in a way she absolutely refused to examine. By the time the meeting ended, the outlet was working and the man was gone. She saw him again 2 days later in the elevator. Harper stepped in, phone in hand, scrolling through an email about a sponsor threatening to pull out of a streaming deal. The doors slid shut and jammed halfway. The elevator jolted. She swayed, hands shooting out to brace herself on the rail, heart leaping up into her throat. "Whoa. You okay?" The deep voice came from the corner. She hadn't even realized someone else was there. It was him. Up close, he was taller than she'd thought, easily over 6 feet, broad-shouldered, filling out a dark grey work shirt with a patch that read Carter & Sons Renovation. The shirt hugged his chest just enough that she could see the solid line of his body underneath, but not so tight it felt like he was showing off. His skin was a rich deep brown, his beard trimmed neat, hair cropped close. Calm eyes, warm and steady, studied her with concern, not curiosity. "I'm fine," Harper snapped, breath coming too fast. It just jerked. "Yeah." He shifted, planting his feet a little wider, like he was automatically bracing for another jolt. "These older buildings do that when the sensors get fussy. We're working on it." "We?" she asked. "Carter," he said, nodding toward the patch on his shirt. "Malik, my dad's firm has the contract for your reno. We do security, electrical, structural reinforcement. Make sure the fancy glass doesn't fall on anyone." His mouth curved in the faintest hint of a smile. "You must be on 32. Everybody I see from up there looks tired." The word tired shouldn't have felt like a diagnosis, but something in the way he said it, matter of fact, like he saw right through the sharp lines of her eyeliner and the immaculately tailored dress, made her fingers tense around her phone. "I'm not tired," she said. He lifted his hands, palms open, a gesture of surrender. "My mistake." The elevator jolted again, then resumed its climb with a hum and a shiver. Harper stared straight ahead at the doors, fighting her own pounding heartbeat. She could feel him a step away, solid, grounded, like a living anchor. It annoyed her that she noticed. "Thank you for the explanation," she said coolly. "You're welcome," he replied. No flirtation, no attempt to carry the conversation, just that warm, steady voice. When the doors slid open on her floor, she stepped out without looking back. Her body, traitorous thing that it was, wanted to. It got worse after that. He was everywhere. In the lobby, talking quietly with the security guard and fixing a scanner that kept glitching. In the stairwell, hauling rolls of wiring over one shoulder. On the roof, visible through the glass wall of the executive lounge, checking the AC units. Always moving, always working, always with that same calm. Harper noticed the way people relaxed when he was around. The way the receptionist, who usually hovered at the edge of panic, smiled more. The way the interns lingered to ask questions about tools and plans, and he answered without talking down to them. She also noticed the way some of the board members looked at him, like he was part of the building instead of someone who worked in it, invisible until something broke. She told herself that was why she bristled whenever she saw him, not because of the strange pull twining her stomach into knots. He's in your office again. Her assistant, Claire, hovered at the door, nervous. I told him you weren't available, but he said he had to check the wiring behind the panel before tonight. The storm, something about power surges. I don't want people just walking into my office, Harper said, irritation lashing out to cover the sudden rush of something else. Anticipation. Heat. Claire winced. Should I tell him to come back? Harper hesitated. Logic said yes. Logic said keep boundaries, Lane. Logic said this man was the exact opposite of everything that fit in her world of spreadsheets and streaming rights and brand partnerships. But the thought of him being in her office without her there... No, she said, standing. I'll supervise. She walked in with her spine straight, every line of her thick, curvy body contained inside black silk and sharp angles. He was crouched by the wall panel, tools laid out on a cloth instead of directly on her polished floor. The care of that made her chest feel tight for a moment. He glanced back at her. Ms. Lane, sorry to invade your space. This room's on the critical circuit, so it has to be tested before the storm hits. This room? She echoed. There are other executives. Yeah, he said, turning back to the panel, but your server feed runs through here. If this trips, half your live broadcasts go down. Of course it did. She never thought about the wires and circuits that kept her empire humming. She thought about numbers and narratives, not the bones underneath. And you know that because... she asked. He smiled a little, not looking at her. Because I read the schematics before I start tearing into walls. My dad taught me that. You don't cut where you don't understand. Something in the phrase snagged on a memory. Her mother's voice, tired and brittle. They only cut where it's convenient, never where it hurts them. Harper pushed it away. So, she said, moving around the desk and pretending her heart wasn't pounding, you know the building better than we do. I know where the stress points are, he said. The words were casual, but there was a quiet weight to them. Doesn't mean anyone listens when I say slow down. She caught the faint frustration under his tone and surprised herself by asking, who doesn't listen? He looked over his shoulder at her then, really looked, eyes meeting hers without flinching. The people who think speed is the only metric that matters. Her jaw clenched. For a second, it felt like he'd walked into her chest and flicked on a light. We're not reckless, she said. I didn't say you were. But that's what you meant, she replied, the defensiveness in her own voice shocking her. We move fast because the market moves fast. If we slow down, someone else gets there first. That's reality. He studied her for a beat. She hated that it felt like he was seeing more than she was saying. Reality can still have load limits, he said softly. Even steel bends if you push it hard enough, long enough. Heat rose up her throat, part anger, part something else she refused to name. You're a contractor, Harper said crisply. I appreciate your expertise, but you don't get to tell me how to run my company. For a beat the room went still. He nodded once, slowly, and the hint of warmth in his eyes cooled into something steadier. Not compliance, not fear, just acceptance. Understood, he said. I'll stay in my lane. The phrase stung, because it sounded like something she'd say, because it threw into sharp relief all the invisible lines she drew around herself and everyone else. He turned back to the panel, fingers sure and precise, and she should have gone back to work. She should have sat down, opened her laptop, and buried herself in the upcoming investor call. Instead, she watched his hands, the way his knuckles flexed, the way his shoulders moved, the way the tendons in his forearms shifted under warm skin. Her mouth went dry. Her chest felt tight. She hated it. Hated that a man with calloused hands and quiet eyes could make her feel more off balance than a hostile shareholder meeting. Hated that she'd heard his words, load limits, and couldn't shake the echo. Hated that a part of her was curious about what else he saw when he looked at buildings, at people. She hated how much she wanted to ask him. "Will the power hold?" she asked instead, words coming out sharper than she meant. He closed the panel with a soft click, wiped his hands on a cloth and stood. Up close, he seemed even taller. She had to tilt her chin to meet his gaze. "It'll hold," he said. "For now." "For now?" she repeated. "Storms show you where the cracks already are," Malik replied. "Not where you wish they weren't." The air between them tightened. For a moment, Harper had the insane impulse to tell him everything. How she hadn't slept more than 4 hours in months. How her chest hurt every time she thought about failure. How sometimes she found herself staring out at the city and wondering what it would feel like to drop all of it and walk away. Instead, she smoothed her skirt, smothering the impulse to confess under years of practiced composure. "Then do your job," she said quietly. "Make sure nothing breaks." His jaw flexed just once. "I'll do what I can." He packed his tools with that same careful efficiency, nodding to her before leaving. No lingering look, no flirtatious comment. Just a straightforward exit, the door clicking shut behind him. Harper exhaled slowly, alone in her office, the storm clouds gathering beyond the glass. She told herself that the heaviness in her chest was just stress. She told herself she didn't care if he liked her. She told herself she didn't need his approval, his steady eyes, his quiet honesty. She told herself a lot of things. But long after he left, she could still hear his voice in her head. "Storms show you where the cracks already are." And for the first time in a long time, Harper Lane wondered what would happen when something finally gave way, inside the building. Or inside her. The storm hit on a Thursday, because of course it did. Harper watched it roll in from her corner office, the glass wall turning into a sheet of bruised grey. Rain hammered the city, streaking the windows. Lightning flashed somewhere beyond the river. A second later, thunder rattled the glass. She should have been thinking about the quarterly numbers on her screen. Instead, she was thinking about wiring. Load limits. Cracks. About Malik. Annoying. Almost everyone had gone home early. HR sent out an all-staff email about non-essential personnel leaving before the worst of it. Harper had rolled her eyes. Lannestra was entirely digital. Nothing physically flooded if it rained. But the storm had disrupted flights and live events, and she needed to be ready to pivot 3 campaigns if venues went dark. So she stayed. Of course she stayed. When the building lights flickered for the first time, she told herself it was nothing. When they flickered again, longer this time, and the hum of the air system hiccuped, something cold slid under her ribs. She picked up her desk phone and punched in a number she shouldn't have had memorized. He answered on the second ring. "Carter." "It's Lane," she said, hating the way her voice softened around his name. The lights just flickered, twice. "Yeah, we saw it from the sub-basement," he said. In the background, she heard the low murmur of other voices, a radio crackle. "We're switching some loads to back up before the grid panics. You alone up there?" "I'm working," she said. "That's what this building is for." He hummed. "That's a yes." Irritation sparked. "I didn't call for a lecture." "I know," he said easily. "You called because something feels wrong. Stay away from the interior stairwells for now. We're testing the emergency strips. If you have to move, take the west corridor. The backup's cleaner there." "Musimane, you're treating me like one of your circuits." "Circuits don't argue," he said. She could hear the faint smile in his voice. "They just blow." Before she could answer, the line crackled and cut. "Malik?" she snapped. "Hello?" Silence. Then, as if on cue, the entire floor went dark. Her brain knew it was just the power. Her body didn't care. For one awful second, she wasn't in a high-tech office tower, but in a cramped apartment as a child, listening to her mother's ragged breathing and her father's voice slurring from the next room, the single lamp flickering like it was afraid. Her chest seized. She shot to her feet so quickly her chair rolled back and bumped the wall. Emergency strips along the floor flicked on a heartbeat later, cold white lines tracing the exits. The screens on her desk blinked back to life on limited power. The air returned in a rush. Harper stood there, fingers digging into the edge of her desk, furious with herself for the way she was shaking. The office door opened without a knock. She spun. "I told you?" The words died when she saw who it was. Malik stood in the doorway, flashlight in one hand, radio clipped to his belt. His work shirt clung a little to his chest, damp from the dash through the rain. The beam from the flashlight was pointed down, respectful, but it caught the curve of her hip where her dress hugged tight before flaring over her thighs. He flicked the light away immediately, as if he'd felt her flinch. "You okay?" he asked. Harper swallowed, forcing her voice into something flat and cool. "Why wouldn't I be?" "Because the power just tripped to emergency on this side, and you're still here," he said. "Most people panicked and ran for the stairs." "I don't panic," she snapped. He leaned his shoulder against the doorframe, while studying her in the soft glow from the floor strips. Even half in shadow, he looked infuriatingly steady. "No," he said finally. "You don't panic, you brace." He made a small motion with one hand, like he was tracing a shape around her. Jaw locked, hands white-knuckled, breath too shallow. That's not better. Heat flared in her cheeks. "You are wildly overstepping." "Probably," he said. "But you called me." "I called because the lights flickered," she said. "Not because I—" "Need you" rose up in her throat like something poisonous. She bit it back hard. "Not for this." Thunder boomed, closer now. The window shivered. She did not. His eyes flicked to her hands, still gripping the desk. "We're running on backup for this block," he said, voice gentler. "The main feed took a hit 2 streets over. I'm going floor to floor, making sure no one's stuck in dead zones. Thought I'd start with the most stubborn person in the building." "Is that supposed to be charming?" she asked. "It's supposed to be honest." The flashlight beam swept the ceiling briefly, then the corners, like he was checking for threats only he could see. "You shouldn't be up here alone," he said. "If the backup fails, this floor will go dark. No strips, no screens." "I have a phone," she said. "Phones don't make light if the emergency system drains the last of the juice," he replied. "Come on, I'll walk you down to 20 at least." "They've got more bodies there. Less likely to miss you if something goes sideways." The words "miss you" shouldn't have caught in her chest. She ripped her gaze away from his. "I'm not a child who needs escorting." "I didn't say you were." He straightened, the easy lean gone. For the first time since he walked in, a thread of impatience entered his tone. "But I'm not asking as your contractor, Harper. I'm telling you as the guy who actually knows what this building can take. Get your laptop. You can work from 20. He'd used her first name without thinking about it. She hated the way her body reacted. Heat curled low in her stomach, hot and reckless, completely out of proportion to the situation. Every rational part of her wanted to snap. "You don't get to use my name." Every irrational part wanted to hear it again, softer, closer to her ear. "I hate this," she muttered, more to herself than to him. "What?" he asked. "Needing you. Wanting the way you make it feel safe to breathe. Being interrupted," she said instead. "Fine, give me a minute." She grabbed her laptop, snapped it shut, and slid it into her bag. He waited by the door, giving her space, the flashlight beam carefully angled at the floor. When she stepped past him, the smell of rain and metal and something warm and clean, soap and skin hit her, and her composure wobbled. In the hallway, the emergency strips cast everything in low, eerie light. The usual office chatter was gone. Their footsteps sounded too loud. They reached the stairwell. He paused, testing the handle first, peering in, sweeping the beam down the stairs. "Clear," he murmured. "Hand on the rail. These steps are shallow." "I wear 5-inch heels to investor dinners," she said, one hand instinctively touching her hip, where the fabric pulled smooth over the generous slope. "I can manage stairs." "Didn't say you couldn't," he replied. "I said be careful." No one talked to her like this. Not in years. Not since before she learned that if you gave people an inch, they'd take a mile and blame you when they fell off the cliff. Halfway down, the building shuddered as lightning cracked too close. The emergency lights flickered. For a heartbeat, the stairwell plunged into absolute black. Something in Harper's chest snapped. Her hand shot out blindly and curled around Malik's forearm. Solid, warm, real. He stopped instantly, planting his feet, letting her hold on, not moving an inch. "You're okay," he said quietly in the dark. "I'm right here. Lights will be back in 3, 2. The strips glowed back to life on one. Harper realized how hard she was gripping him and yanked her hand back like she'd been burned. I didn't. I'm fine. He didn't smirk, didn't make a joke, just nodded once, accepting the lie she needed. 20's just 2 more flights, he said. On 20, there were indeed more people. Clusters of staff huddled in the common area, their faces lit by laptop screens and phone flashlights. The energy was nervous, jittery. Someone laughed too loudly at a joke that wasn't funny. "You'll be safer here," Malik said. "More witnesses if anything breaks." He lifted the radio. "I need to check the other side of the building." She should have let him go. Should have turned to her laptop to work as to the only place she ever let herself feel competent. Instead, she heard herself say, "Carter." He paused, looking back at her. "Is my office in danger?" she asked. "And I don't mean the power. I mean the building. Structural risk." "Right now?" he said. "No. You're not about to fall 32 floors, but the system's been asking for an upgrade for a long time and getting band-aids. That's not on you. That's on whoever kept signing off on the cheapest bids. That includes me," she said quietly. "Then maybe this is your reminder." His eyes held hers, steady. "You said you don't panic. Good. Don't. But you don't listen to fear either, not even when it's telling you something useful. You're very comfortable giving your opinions to people who sign your checks," she said, trying for sharp. It came out softer than she intended. "I'm not comfortable," he said. "I'm just tired of watching things crack in slow motion." His gaze flicked over her face, searching. Buildings, people. The word hit like a fingertip pressed to a bruise. She forced a scoff. "I don't crack," she said. He studied her for a long moment, as if weighing the cost of saying what he was thinking. "Everyone does," he murmured. "The question is whether you let anyone see it." The air between them tightened again, full of everything she refused to name. "Go fix your circuits," she said, armor snapping back into place. "I have a company to run." A shadow crossed his face. Not hurt exactly, but something quiet and disappointed, like he'd watched a door slam. "If that's what you want," he said. What she wanted was to grab his shirt, drag him into an empty office, and press her face into his chest until the trembling in her bones stopped. What she wanted was to ask him to keep talking, keep standing there, keep being some impossible combination of steady and gentle and unafraid of her sharp edges. What she wanted was terrifying. So she did what she always did with things that scared her. She shut the feeling in a box and sealed it with ice. "That's what I want," she said. For a heartbeat, something unreadable moved behind his eyes. Then he nodded once and turned away, disappearing into the dim corridor, radio crackling at his hip. Harper stood in the humming half-light of the 20th floor, laptop bag heavy on her shoulder, the taste of swallowed words bitter on her tongue. She hated storms. She hated how the building felt unstable. She hated the way everyone was looking to her for calm. But most of all, she hated how much she wanted the one person who hadn't asked a single thing from her, except the one thing she didn't know how to give. Honesty. Letting him see the cracks. She sank into a chair and opened her laptop with shaking fingers, pretending the damp on her palms was from the rain and not from the memory of his skin under her hand in the dark. By Monday, the storm was just a story everyone else told. The lights were steady again, servers humming like nothing had ever flickered. People in sleek clothes laughed about that wild Thursday in the break room, turning it into something funny and distant. Only Harper still felt it in her bones. She still heard the echo of Malik's voice in the dark stairwell. "I'm right here." She still felt the warm, solid weight of his forearm under her hand, the way he'd braced for both of them. And now, he was the one who was gone. Not literally. Carter and Sons were still on site, still patching and upgrading, still in every maintenance schedule and project brief. He was in the building. He just wasn't anywhere near her. Malik no longer passed her office, by coincidence. No more knocks on her door with updates he could have emailed. In the lobby, he gave her the same polite nod he gave everyone else. On the elevator, if she stepped in on one floor, he quietly stepped out on the next, offering the person behind him a chance to squeeze past. He was there. But the steady warmth that had wrapped around her during the storm was pointed firmly away from her now. "Miss Lane?" Harper blinked, dragging her eyes away from the security camera feed. She hadn't meant to be watching it. She'd just clicked. and then stared at those little black and white boxes, catching brief flashes of Malik moving through hallways and mechanical rooms like a ghost. Claire hovered at the doorway, clutching a tablet. You, signed the vendor contract twice, once in the signature box and once in the notes. Harper looked down at her screen. Sure enough, her name was there, bold and looping in 2 places. She didn't remember writing either. "Fix it," she said, "and send me the final deck for Larian." Claire hesitated. "Are you?" "I'm fine." The words came out sharper than she intended. Close the door. When Claire left, the office seemed to expand, the glass walls suddenly too big, the city too far away. 2 weeks since the storm. 2 weeks since she'd clamped her fingers around Malik's arm in the dark and felt for one terrifying second safe. 2 weeks since she'd told herself that the way her body reacted to his steadiness was nothing. Gratitude, nerves, biology, anything but the one thing she couldn't afford. Want. She hated want. You couldn't spreadsheet it, you couldn't schedule it. Want made people sloppy. Want made her mother take her father back every time he staggered home with apologies and cheap flowers. Harper had sworn she would never be that woman. So when she caught herself looking for Malik in reflections and doorways, she did what she always did with dangerous things. She cut. Short answers. Cooler tone. Less eye contact. Keep it professional. Keep it contained. She'd told herself it was working. Then why did the air feel thinner every time he walked past her without really seeing her? She found him on the rooftop level by accident. She'd gone up to the executive lounge to breathe between calls. Just a 5-minute break, she'd told herself. Just a coffee. Her heels clicked softly on the marble, curves wrapped in a navy dress that hugged her hips and cinched her waist. Her lipstick was perfect, hair smooth, every inch of her designed to say unshakable. Then she walked into the lounge, and there he was. Malik stood by the big industrial coffee machine, sleeves rolled up, forearms bare and dusted with faint grime from whatever unit he'd been crawling around in. His work shirt clung damp at the collar. He must have just come from the roof. Sunlight pooled around him where it streamed through the glass, painting his deep brown skin with a soft glow. He looked up when the door whispered shut behind her. For a second his face was open, surprised. Then she saw it, the small shift like a door closing. "Miss Lane." His voice was neutral, not cold, not warm, just politely distant. Not Harper. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her bag. "Are you supposed to be up here?" she asked, defaulting to control. "This floor is restricted during peak hours." He lifted the paper cup in his hand by way of answer. "Building management asked me to check the roof chillers before the heat wave slams us. I grabbed a coffee so I don't pass out on your expensive equipment." He was giving her something light to latch onto. A joke, an easy out. She could take it. She could laugh, step closer, say thank you for the other night, and are you okay, and I haven't stopped thinking about your voice in the dark. Instead, fear did what it always did, pressed her palm over her mouth and spoke for her. "If you're behind schedule, maybe spending less time flirting with the coffee machine would help," she said. The words tasted like acid the instant they left. Malik went very still. Not dramatically, not with some showy reaction. Just a tiny tightening around his mouth, a single muscle jumping in his jaw. "We're not behind schedule," he said finally. His voice wasn't raised, but the warmth was gone. "We're actually ahead. The only reason your building didn't go fully dark during the storm is because I spent 3 nights there in a row before it hit, rerouting circuits someone else cheaped out on." Guilt pricked, sharp and immediate. "That's not what I meant." "It's exactly what you meant," he said quietly. He set the cup down with too much care, as if he didn't trust himself not to crush it. "You're good with words. You don't say things by accident." A flush crawled up her neck. "My job is to hold people accountable for timelines. That's all this is." He studied her for a long moment, eyes searching her face like he was looking for cracks in the plaster. "I know what your job is," he murmured. "I also know the difference between you holding me accountable and you pushing me away." There it was, stripped bare, no polite nod, no evasive half-smile, just the truth. Her instinct was to deny it, to say, "I don't push, I manage," to throw a shield of numbers and contracts between them. Instead, something else slipped out. "You're the one who backed off," she said. The words came out smaller than she meant. "You barely look at me anymore. He blinked, surprise flickering across his face. "Because every time I do, you cut," he said. "You ice over. You act like the storm never happened." She swallowed. Maybe it didn't mean what you think it did. "Ouch," he said softly. God, she hated herself for that one. "I didn't." "No," he interrupted, still calm. "I get it. You grabbed my arm in the dark because the lights went out. You called me because the system failed. That's my job. I'm not confusing that with some movie moment." The lie in his eyes hurt more than the words. "But here's my side," he continued, voice roughening just a fraction. "I like you. Too much, probably. I hear your voice on the radio and my brain thinks, where is she? Is she okay? Even when you're just yelling about streaming numbers. I think about you on days I don't step foot in this building. That's my problem. I've been handling it." "Malik." He held up a hand. "I was okay being the guy who checks your circuits and tells you to take the West Corridor, even when you snap at me for talking about load limits instead of feelings." His gaze caught hers, steady. "But what I can't be is your emergency generator." She frowned. "What does that even mean?" "It means you can't flip me on when it's dark, grab onto me until the ground stops shaking, and then flip me off when the lights come back," he said. "No anger, just sadness. I can't keep walking into your storm, bracing for both of us, and then pretend I don't exist to you at noon on a Monday." Her chest felt too tight. Her dress suddenly too small for her body, her curves, her lungs. "That's not fair," she said, because the alternative was your right, and she didn't know how to live with that. His eyes softened just a little. "It's probably the fairest thing I've said to you," he replied. "I'm not asking you to need me, Harper. I'm not asking you for some grand confession. I'm telling you I can't keep showing up when you on purpose make sure I know I don't matter once the power's back." "I never said you don't matter," she whispered. "You never had to," he said. "You're also very good at what you don't say." Silence pulsed between them. The hum of the lounge, the faint thrum of the city outside, the low whoosh of AC, all of it felt suddenly too loud. She could fix this. Surely she could fix this. She fixed crisis PR in her sleep. She calmed raging investors with a slide deck and a smile. But there was no script for this, no bullet points, just the raw, exposed truth of a man who had stood beside her in the dark and was now telling her he couldn't keep doing it alone. "So what?" she asked, throat burning. "You're just going to disappear? Walk away because I'm not soft enough?" His jaw flexed. "This isn't about soft," he said. "It's about honest. You hate how much you want anything you can't control, so you punish it until it behaves or leaves. I'm choosing the option where I keep my self-respect." The words landed like a slap. He drew in a breath, let it out slowly. "Contract's got 2 weeks left," he said. "We'll finish the work. You'll get the building you paid for. Stronger, safer, less likely to break under stress. After that, I'll brief your facilities team, hand over the schematics, and Carter and Sons will move to the next job." Her heart lurched. "And us?" The question slipped out before she could strangle it. A flicker of pain crossed his face. "There is no us," he said gently. "You never let there be. Not really." Then he stepped past her. He didn't shove, didn't rush. He just walked, each measured step feeling like the slow unspooling of some hidden cable inside her chest. The door hissed open. "Malik," she said, her voice too small for the room, too late for everything. He paused with his hand on the frame, turned his head just enough that she could see the line of his jaw, the profile she'd stared at on grainy security footage like an idiot. "Yeah?" he asked. She could say it now. "Don't go." She could finally admit it. "I wanted you. I still do. I'm scared out of my mind, but I don't want you to walk away." Her throat locked. "Don't be late on the handover," she managed. For a moment, all the light went out of his face. "Of course," he said. Then Malik Carter, the man who had held her steady in the stairwell and told her she was okay when the world went dark, walked out of the lounge and out of her reach. The door closed with a soft click. Harper stood there, thick body trembling inside the armor of her dress, curves rising and falling too fast as she tried to breathe around the hollow ache in her chest. She had always believed that wanting someone made you weak. But watching him walk away, she realized the truth was so much worse. She had finally found someone who could stand in the dark with her, and she'd taught him how to leave.